Chapter 3498, Chapter 572, Mythical Era's Mana. Chapter 3498, Chapter 572, Mythical Era's Mana. Chapter 572, Mythical Era's Mana. Before Shifeng and billowing water could recover from the initial shock of experiencing the Western continent's environment, hundreds of players suddenly swarmed them from all corners of the street. Each and every one of them resembled starving dogs that had just spotted two juicy pieces of meat. It's been so long since we've had any new superior demigods. And this time, we got two. Friends, how about joining our Falcon party? I guarantee you'll earn 100 contribution points per excursion. At that rate, you can exchange for a mana purification technique in just 3 days. Come to our rainstorm party instead. We can help you obtain bronze purification techniques, if not even basic ones. You folks from Rainstorm sure love to boast. A bronze purification technique? Not a single person in your party has managed to learn one yet. Friends, join our Half-Leaf party instead. Our party leader is an expert who has already mastered a bronze purification technique. We earn far more contribution points than the other parties. The town's players shouted offers to Shifeng and billowing water, one after another, without giving them any time to react. Mana purification techniques? Shifeng was greatly surprised by the offers everyone made. He had only learned how to improve his mana after accepting the primordial abyssal god's legacy. However, it was an incomplete technique that provided him with limited improvements. Judging by the strength of the surrounding players' mana and the superior mana purification techniques they spoke of, it was evident that their techniques surpassed his incomplete one. Logically, the strength of his mana should rank number 1 among players of the same tier because of the Tier 5 legendary mana body he created. Even if there were some Tier 5 players with stronger mana, the gap between them shouldn't be significant. However, the Tier 5 players around him possessed significantly stronger mana than him. Some even had mana rivaling Tier 6 gods, which was simply unbelievable. If he could bring a large number of these so-called mana purification techniques back with him or establish a long-term supply chain, it would undoubtedly lead to qualitative transformations in the overall strength of Zero Wings members. 7 Luminaries Town, 7 Luminaries Bar. After listening to the fervent invitations from various parties in the town, Shifeng and Billowing Water chose to engage in further negotiations with a female elf named Moon Bamboo, who was a guardian knight and had mastered a bronze mana purification technique. How about it? Will you join us, friends? While Dawnlight might not be among the top 5 parties in town, we are solidly ranked in the top 10, Moon Bamboo explained to Shifeng and Billowing Water. After elegantly taking a sip of coffee, she continued, we currently need 2 more members to complete our party. If you join Dawnlight, you'll enjoy 2 major benefits that most other parties can't offer. Firstly, you won't have to worry about acquiring a bronze purification technique. The party leader and I have already mastered one each, while the other 2 members have acquired their own, they just need to learn how to use them. So, if we obtain more bronze purification techniques in the future, you too will receive your share right away. Additionally, once the other 2 members succeed in learning their bronze purification techniques, Dawnlight will have 4 members who have mastered the technique. At that time, our party won't have to fear encountering teams composed of monstrous Tier 5 experts from the Holy Race. As a side note, both the party leader and I have mastered 2 gold combat techniques each. Secondly, you'll save on accommodation fees. Normally, you would have to spend 1 eternal gold per day for accommodation in the town. However, our party has used contribution points to rent a 6-person hotel suite for a month. We still have more than 10 days left, so you won't have to spend anything on accommodation during this period. While Moon Bamboo explained the benefits of joining the Dawnlight party to Shifeng and Billowing Water, a tall and muscular man, a Tier 5 summoner, walked over to the table and unceremoniously sat down next to her. Bamboo, you've been negotiating with these youngsters for half an hour, and you still haven't won them over. I thought you'd be more capable with that beauty and big sister energy of yours, the male summoner said, sighing and shaking his head. I'm recruiting 2 superior demigods at the same time. Why don't you give it a try, Mr. Party Leader? Moon Bamboo said, rolling her eyes at the male summoner. There were very few players operating in 7 Luminaries Town, and the majority of them were members of the various pseudo-apex powers. Players from other powers constituted less than 10% of the town's population. It should be known that human players who died on the Western continent would be sent back to the Eternal Continent with 100% certainty. If they wished to return to the Western continent, they would have to pay an additional 150 eternal gold for the teleportation fee. Such an expenditure was exorbitant, even for the various pseudo-apex powers. Unless they had made significant contributions to their guilds on the Western continent, they would have to pay out of their own pockets. Hence, it became very difficult for non-pseudo-apex power parties to recruit new members. After all, newcomers had plenty of parties to choose from, so they would naturally compare their options. "My name is Sky Pivot, and I am the party leader of Dawnlight," the male summoner introduced himself to Shafong and Billowing Water with a smile. "Our party is planning to explore the Plane of Fallen Gods, a level 160 to level 180 map, soon. Rumor has it that the map drops treasures that can help with our Tier 6 promotion. As the party leader, I can exercise my authority to allow you to have first pick of one of the items we obtain during the expedition. If we acquire additional mana purification techniques, I will also give them to you for free, so you won't need to invoke your privilege for them. What do you think, friends?" When Sky Pivot finished speaking, Moon Bamboo couldn't help but look at him in shock. Every party was currently preparing to tackle the Plane of Fallen Gods in order to achieve Tier 6 promotion as quickly as possible. After all, this would give them an advantage over the other parties in town and give them a head start in exploring the Primordial Demon's Necropolis, a world mode regional dungeon rumored to drop advanced bronze and possibly even silver mana purification techniques. If they were to let the two newcomers have the promotion treasure first, it would likely impact their later exploration of the Primordial Demon's Necropolis. "If that's the case, I would like to join your party," Shafong said after considering his options. His primary goal was to reach Tier 6. As for the World Fragment, obtaining it relied entirely on luck. Rather than blindly searching for a World Fragment, he would be better off securing a mana purification technique first and learning more about the Western continent. This way, even if he were to operate solo in the future, he would have a better chance of surviving and achieving his goals. "I'm fine with it, too," Billowing Water said, nodding. The promotion treasure and mana purification technique also tempted her. "Great. Then it's settled. We'll set off tomorrow," Sky Pivot exclaimed, laughing heartily. Following that, Shafong and Billowing Water raised their cups to celebrate their joining the Dawnlight party. After enjoying a delicious meal at the bar, they rested in the hotel until dawn. At the break of dawn, under Sky Pivot's urging, the entire party of 6 set off for the Plane of Fallen Gods. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3499, Chapter 573, Mana Purification Technique. Chapter 3499, Chapter 573, Mana Purification Technique. Chapter 573, Mana Purification Technique. Western Continent, Plane of Fallen Gods. The Holy Race's presence was everywhere on the Western Continent, so it was incredibly challenging for human players to explore and acquire resources here. If human players were to traverse the Western Continent, they would come across Holy Race parties or teams fighting monsters almost once every few minutes. To avoid clashing with these Holy Race players, Shafong and the others had to proceed with extreme caution, which, in turn, hampered their travel speed. The Plane of Fallen Gods was situated 4 large maps away from 7 Luminaries town. Normally, it would only take Holy Race players 2 or 3 hours to cross this distance, but Shafong and the others took roughly 7 hours. Even so, this could already be considered a fast travel speed for human players, as other Tier 5 human players would need at least 2 days to complete this journey. This was all thanks to Sky Pivot. As a Tier 5 summoner, Sky Pivot could not only summon Tier 5 monsters to fight for him, but he could also use them as mounts. He could even summon flying monsters to use as flying mounts. Meanwhile, the Tier 5 illusory griffin summoned by Sky Pivot could not only act as a flying mount, but it could also rely on its Tier 5 illusion spells to conceal its passengers. Because of this, the illusory griffin looked no different than the average flying monster when it flew in the sky, and it did not attract any attention from the holy race players fighting on the ground. Eventually, after 6 hours of flight, the 20-meter-long illusory griffin arrived at the Plain of Fallen Gods and landed on top of a hill, granting the Dawnlight Party an unobstructed view of their surroundings. Newbies, stick close to me, Budding Leaf, a level 160, tier 5 female oracle, said hurriedly to Shafong and Billowing Water after landing. The strength of your mana is too weak, so it'll quickly get devoured by monsters. When we start fighting later, let the party leader and the others soften up the monsters a little first before joining the fight. The monsters can devour our mana. Billowing Water couldn't help but be surprised. While there might be monsters capable of devouring mana in the greater god's domain, none could devour the mana of players, let alone the mana of tier 5 players. It should be known that the mana of players would reach a near-solid state once they got promoted to tier 5. Even if a monster tried to devour their mana, it wouldn't be an easy task to accomplish. Leaf is right, Splashing Fire, a middle-aged male ranger, said, nodding in agreement with Budding Leaf. The monsters on the Western Continent's inland region can devour mana and holy power. If you don't have sufficiently strong mana or holy power, you'll get sucked dry and killed by the monsters here in no time. Many players had unknowingly died like so when the town was initially founded. Billowing Water was dumbfounded even further. How were they supposed to fight against monsters capable of devouring all forms of energy? For melee players like herself, it wouldn't matter whether she fought using combat techniques or skills. Both would be useless as she couldn't afford to get close to the monsters here. As for Shafong, he was unfazed by this revelation. The information he learned in his previous life included the various problems players faced when fighting monsters on the Western continent. The Western continent's monsters were essentially nightmares for the human pioneers, and they could only rely on ranged players to kill these monsters. Even so, it was a very challenging task to do so. The Western continent's monsters possessed extraordinarily high defense, so much so that even players of the same tier could do barely any damage against them. For example, a tier 5 player casting a tier 5 spell could only shave off about 10,000 HP from a tier 5 legendary monster. It should be known that these tier 5 legendary monsters had HP in the tens of billions, with some even having upwards of 100 billion. An attack that dealt only 10,000 damage wouldn't even be enough to tickle these monsters. Before Budding Leaf and Splashing Fire could continue with their explanations, a level 165 legendary-ranked half-snake in general suddenly emerged from the nearby forest, and it charged at the illusory griffin with a speed that was easily twice as fast as the Eternal Continent's legendary monsters. Half-snake in general, humanoid creature, legendary, level 165 HP 60 billion not good. Run. It's a regional boss. Billowing Water and the others had originally readied themselves for a fight. However, when Sky Pivot saw the half-snake in general, he promptly called for a retreat with a grave expression on his face. That's a regional boss. When Billowing Water saw the half-snake in general's stats, she couldn't understand why Sky Pivot would react so nervously. Normally, level 160 legendary bosses in the Greater God's Domain would have several hundred billion HP at the very least, with some even having up to a trillion HP. If a level 165 monster only had 60 billion HP, it couldn't even be considered a tier 5 legendary monster. It wouldn't take much time for tier 5 players to kill such a monster. Moreover, even if the half-snake in general was indeed a region boss, their tier 5 party should be able to slay it with ease. Before Billowing Water could figure out why Sky Pivot was so terrified, the half-snake in general suddenly appeared beside her while twirling its 2 crescent blades. At the same time, the half-snake in general started to dance an enchanting dance that mesmerized all who saw it. When Billowing Water saw the half-snake in general's blade dance, she could feel herself being drawn to it, and this situation caused an unprecedented chill crept up her spine. A fusion combat technique. The half-snake in general had undoubtedly executed a combat technique at the silver rank or above. Moreover, the attack wasn't composed of just the combat technique but also a mental attack. If she were to fall for the half-snake in general's mesmerization for even a moment, she would lose her life to the regional boss in the blink of an eye. At this time, Billowing Water finally understood why Sky Pivot would react so fearfully toward encountering such a weak regional boss. An attack composed of a combat technique and a mental attack was no different than a fatal poison for players. This was because players would have great difficulty responding with a combat technique of their own while being subjected to a mental attack. Fighting the half-snake in general in such a situation would be an absolute nightmare. Fortunately, Billowing Water was a saint-ranked expert with plenty of combat experience under her belt, and she promptly let out a shout to clear her mind. At the same time, a golden greatsword appeared in her hands, and she used the massive weapon like a shield to defend herself against the half-snake in general's twirling blades. Boom! The instant the weapons collided, Billowing Water was sent flying over 100 yards away. In just one exchange, it was evident that there was a great disparity in strength between both sides. However, the half-snake in general's attack still wasn't over. Utilizing the reactive force generated from having its attack blocked by Billowing Water's formless twilight, the half-snake in general propelled itself toward Shifeng, who was evidently weaker than the 4 other standing members of the party. It's over for this newbie. When Moon Bamboo saw that less than 15 yards separated the half-snake in general and Shifeng, she couldn't help but close her eyes. The half-snake in general was not only fast but also incredibly nimble. Although Moon Bamboo did not know how Billowing Water had managed to summon a greatsword out of nowhere, Shifeng was evidently a standard swordsman as he carried 2 longswords around his waist. If he were subjected to the half-snake in general's mental attack and blade dance simultaneously, he might not even have time to draw his weapons, let alone defend himself. Clang! Suddenly, the sound of metal hitting something hard echoed throughout the area. Immediately afterward, whether it was Moon Bamboo and the others or Billowing Water, who had been sent flying, all of them gaped in shock. At this time, Shifeng could be seen standing steadily in place with both hands raised up to his neck, and the half-snake in general's crescent blades were grasped firmly within his hands. As for the half-snake in general, even though it was hissing menacingly and applying force to its arms, it couldn't push its crescent blades forward by even a millimeter more. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3500, Chapter 574, Half-Step Tier 6. Chapter 3500, Chapter 574, Half-Step Tier 6. Chapter 574, Half-Step Tier 6. This newbie's strength is incredible. If we are talking solely about strength, he has already surpassed the average Tier 6 berserker. Budding Leaf and Splashing Fire were greatly shocked when they saw Shifeng catching the half-snake in general's weapons. The half-snake in general was a legendary-ranked regional boss. While it wasn't a strength-oriented monster, its strength was still vastly superior to even Tier 5 berserkers of the same level. Only Tier 5 berserkers wielding legendary weapons could hope to match it. Not to mention, one couldn't block the half-snake in general's attacks simply by having great strength. Billowing Water was a good example of this. Even though Billowing Water was a swordsman, her strength was already on par with the average Tier 6 berserker of the same level. Yet, the half-snake in general still sent her flying. He's at the half-step Tier 6 standard already, Moon Bamboo exclaimed, a hint of excitement appearing on her face. We've picked up a gem this time. If he can block the boss's fusion combat technique so easily, his concentration must have reached the Tier 6 advanced standard already. He's only short of constructing a divine body to get promoted to Tier 6 now. Most of 7 Luminaries Town's players might be superior demigods, with some having basic attributes rivaling rookie Tier 6 players, but there were still differences between superior demigods. It was especially so on the Western continent. Whether it was the Western continent's environment or monsters, both were different from that of the Eternal Continent and Greater God's domain. While many human players who had entered the Western continent might rival actual Tier 6 players, they couldn't fully exhibit their strength here. This was because the Western continent was home to monsters capable of devouring all forms of energy and launching powerful mental attacks. Without sufficient mana and concentration, players would be powerless against these monsters. Normally, newcomers in 7 Luminaries Town would lack mana and concentration. As a result, the monsters of the Western continent could easily devour their mana and influence their minds. This prevented newcomers from effectively utilizing combat techniques, skills, and spells, limiting them to fighting against average Tier 5 legendary monsters. If a newcomer wished to stand a chance against the Tier 5 regional bosses of the Western continent, they would need to master at least a basic mana purification technique. As for Tier 6 divine monsters, only half-step Tier 6 experts like Sky Pivot and Moon Bamboo, who have mastered bronze mana purification techniques and possess Tier 6 intermediate standard concentration, would stand a fighting chance against them. Currently, although Shifeng's mana was somewhat weak, his concentration had already reached the Tier 6 advanced standard. Even if he were to face a divine monster on the Western continent, he wouldn't be powerless to resist. Meanwhile, the addition of a half-step Tier 6 expert to the party would undoubtedly increase the party's overall strength by a large margin. Is his concentration at such a high level already? Billowing Water, who was sent flying into the distance, couldn't help but look at Shifeng in disbelief. She was confident that her concentration was top-notch, even among paragons of the same generation. And although her concentration had yet to reach the Tier 6 intermediate standard, she wasn't far from reaching it. However, when facing the Half-Snake in General's fusion combat technique, she could barely defend against it. She couldn't utilize any of her combat techniques, which prevented her from resisting the Half-Snake in General's attack completely. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been sent flying by the regional boss. But before Billowing Water could snap out of her daze, several hundred level 160+ Half-Snaken warriors emerged from the surroundings. These Half-Snaken warriors were all Tier 4 mythic monsters. Although each was inferior to Tier 5 players, when they attacked as a group and utilized combination combat techniques, they could still pose a significant threat to Tier 5 players. Moreover, with their high HPs, they could easily drag out the fight and wear out Tier 5 players. Escape is no longer an option, Sky Pivot said, sighing helplessly when he saw the half-snaken warriors that surrounded them. Everyone, prepare for battle. Isn't this great news, leader? It's not every day we get to come across a regional boss, Splashing Fire said, smiling jovially when he saw the approaching half-snaken warriors. Now that our party has one more half-step Tier 6 expert, it would be a waste to run away. I agree with Fire. This is a rare opportunity, Moon Bamboo said, nodding. Normally, their party would avoid any legendary-ranked regional bosses they encountered and target only normal legendary monsters. Of course, it wasn't because they couldn't defeat a legendary-ranked regional boss. It was just that it would take too much time. After all, their party previously only had 2 damage dealers. If they took too much time to finish the boss, nearby Holy Race players were bound to take notice. However, now that their party had gained an extra half-step Tier 6 expert, their party's overall damage output would increase by 50% at the very least. With such a huge improvement to their damage output, they could definitely give raiding a legendary-ranked regional boss a try. Okay. Leaf, Fire, you two go and support Billowing Water, Sky Pivot commanded. The rest of us will handle the regional boss. Got it. Splashing Fire licked his lips and promptly went into action with Budding Leaf. Immediately, Splashing Fire narked his longbow and launched flaming arrows at the approaching half-snaken warriors one after another, the hail of flaming arrows forcing the mythic monsters to scatter in an attempt to avoid the attacks. At the same time, Budding Leaf waved her staff, summoning numerous barriers to isolate the scattered half-snaken warriors and prevent them from executing deadly combination combat techniques. In the blink of an eye, Splashing Fire and Budding Leaf had lowered the threat of the half-snaken warriors by a significant margin. This, in turn, allowed Billowing Water to withstand and repulse the mythic monsters with little effort. Let's begin attacking as well, Sky Pivot said when he saw the half-snaken warriors getting blocked. Then, he returned his focus to the half-snaken general and continued, our time is limited. We must eliminate this boss before the Holy Race players arrive. After saying so, Sky Pivot constructed a summoning array that brought forth 2 legendary monsters. Then, together with the previously summoned illusory griffin, the 3 summoned creatures stood around Sky Pivot and transformed into a phantom dragon. Under Sky Pivot's control, the phantom dragon cast Dragon's Glory, a 3-fold Tier 5 draconic spell. Immediately, hundreds of laser beams shot at the half-snaken general from all directions. At the same time, Moon Bamboo appeared behind the half-snaken general and raised her shield, releasing numerous shadow chains that bound the regional boss. At the same time, A gigantic sword of light also descended from the sky. Tier 5 super spell, Light Shadow Taboo. Seeing Sky Pivot and Moon Bamboo taking action, Shifeng unsheathed the Shadow Incinerator and Winter of Eternal Night before executing Sword's orbit, forming a galaxy of stars that spread to his surroundings. Boom! The top of the hill was flattened in the blink of an eye, and everyone within a 30,000-yard radius could clearly hear the battle atop the hill. There's a battle happening over there. Whoever's fighting must be fighting a regional boss if they're causing such a huge commotion. Let's hurry on over. We can't let the others get ahead of us. Over a dozen holy race teams operating in the vicinity could hear the commotion caused by the Dawnlight Party's battle, and they hurriedly charged toward the source of the commotion with fervent eyes. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3501, Chapter 575, Visit from Red Frost. Chapter 3501, Chapter 575, Visit from Red Frost. Chapter 575, Visit from Red Frost. Plain of Fallen Gods. The hill that was originally over 100 meters tall had transformed into a vast canyon after a battle, which affected a radius of 10 kilometers, took place here. Numerous gorges that were over 100 meters deep could be seen dotting the canyon. The entire terrain had undergone a drastic transformation, and gradually mending spatial tiers could still be seen in the canyon. The battle's already over. Damn it. We were still one step too late. How could it have ended so quickly? It hasn't been more than 3 minutes since we first heard the commotion. Could it have been a 100-man team? When the teams of holy race experts arrived at the battlefield, they were disappointed to find that the battle they came to interfere with had already concluded. At the same time, they couldn't help but wonder what had taken place here. They had hurried their way over here as soon as they heard the commotion. They had even ignored the monsters that tried to attack them, afraid they would miss out on the action. While the Plain of Fallen Gods was vast, it had no more than 20 regional bosses. But maybe because of how few regional bosses there were here, each regional boss offered extraordinary rewards. It was especially so for the first kill rewards. Due to this, competition over the Plain of Fallen Gods regional bosses was exceptionally intense. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that a swarm of players would gather at even the slightest sign of a regional boss. Yet, even though they had taken such a short time to reach the battlefield, they failed to find even a single monster after arriving, let alone players. It was as if the battle they heard was nothing but a dream. While teams of holy race experts were coming and going from the battlefield, the Dawnlight Party was cautiously resting in a small cave deep within the depths of the canyon. The party of 6 didn't even dare to breathe loudly as they tentatively stared at the countdown timer displayed in the corner of their vision, the timer indicating how much time was left until they could log out of the game. 10 more seconds. This barrier should hold up. Budding Leaf whispered as she watched several holy race teams investigate the canyon outside. These holy race players are truly insane. How did so many of them show up in less than 3 minutes? It's a good thing that you guys fought quickly, leader. Otherwise, we would have had to fight against over 1,000 holy race experts. Billowing Water also gazed out of the cave solemnly, not daring to relax her guard. Although she had already heard about the situation regarding the Western Continent's inland region from Sky Pivot and Moon Bamboo, she still couldn't help but be frightened by all the holy race teams outside. Every holy race player that came to check in on the canyon was at level 160, tier 5 and above. Moreover, every one of them gave off a presence comparable to the veterans of 7 Luminaries Town, and each team had at least 3 experts of Sky Pivot and Moon Bamboo's caliber. Even though Billowing Water stood among the apex of the Eternal Continent's experts, she was reduced to the weakest caste in this place. We were lucky this time. We could have never finished the boss so quickly without Black Flame's help, Sky Pivot said, smiling. As we previously discussed, we'll log off to rest for 6 hours. The holy race players outside should give up and leave for good after failing to find anything for 6 hours. Everyone nodded in agreement. Then, as soon as their respective timers counted down to 0, they promptly chose to log out of the game one after another. Just as everyone was fading out of existence, Billowing Water couldn't help but look at Shifeng's fading figure with a complicated look. Originally, She thought she could let Shifeng know his insignificance by bringing him to the Western continent. She never thought she would be the one being shown how insignificant she was instead. In fact, if it weren't for Shifeng's assistance this time, their party would have never been able to kill the half-snake in general and secure the regional boss's lucrative loot. Star Lake City, Zero Wing Training Center. As the sun set, the virtual gaming cabin of a special living quarter slowly opened. Then, Shifeng climbed out of the cabin, grabbed one of the life potions placed next to the cabin, and drank it while admiring the cityscape outside the window. As one of Star Lake City's large training centers, the Zero Wing Training Center was only a couple of streets away from the city's commercial center. Even as the sky darkened, the streets outside the building remained bustling with cars and people. Many of these people were young talents who had come from the surrounding towns to join the city's various powers. It seems Zero Wing's fame has spread quite a bit, Shifeng thought in surprise when he saw the long line of people waiting to enter the Zero Wing Training Center. Previously, the long line of people waiting outside the Zero Wing Training Center was mainly due to Zero Wing's partnership with the Green God Corporation. The Green God Corporation had encouraged many of its members, who had been kicked out of Silver Frost City, to come to Star Lake City and join Zero Wing. However, even after several days had passed, the number of people seeking to join Zero Wing did not decrease. On the contrary, it was continuously increasing. After learning that Zero Wing was recruiting members, many powers operating in the neighboring towns had even paid a hefty price to send their young talents to take Zero Wing's recruitment test. Because of this, Gentle Snow and Hidden Soul had to work hectically these past few days. Shifeng even had to start worrying about the training center's lack of space and thinking about purchasing more real estate in Star Lake City. Otherwise, Zero Wing could, at most, afford to recruit around 1,000 geniuses to nurture. If Zero Wing only had 1,000 geniuses to work with, who knew how long it would take for the guild to gain more mental strength grandmasters, become recognized as a Class 2 guild by the God's Domain Association, and become qualified to move into a second-tier city. I've already received the Blaze conglomerate's promised 3 billion star coins, but the 10 drops of Stardew will probably take another day or two to arrive. Looking at his watch, Shifeng inwardly prayed, let's hope these Stardews can help Zero Wing reach Class 2 quickly. Otherwise, the guild's development in the Crystal City of Secrets will stagnate. The development of human powers on the Western continent was much faster than he anticipated. The Seven Luminaries Alliance had already established a town on the Western continent. At this rate, he could already tell that the conflict between humans and the Holy Race would happen much sooner and at a much greater intensity. Currently, Zero Wing might have relied on the secret crystal trading firm's benefits to recruit a batch of fifth-floor experts, but if Zero Wing couldn't offer any additional benefits, these fifth-floor experts were bound to leave Zero Wing once they fulfilled their contract. While Shifeng was contemplating how he should distribute the 10 drops of Stardew, Gentle Snow suddenly contacted him. Commander Red Frost is here to see you, guild leader. She says she has something urgent to discuss with you. Should I let her in? Commander Red Frost wants to see me. Shifeng was surprised by Red Frost's visit. As the Star Lake Legion's commander, Red Frost was a very busy person, and even the Legion's vice commanders could rarely meet her, let alone get her to visit them in person. Immediately, Shifeng had Gentle Snow lead Red Frost to the top floor's VIP lounge. Zero Wing Training Center, VIP lounge. When Shifeng stepped into the room, he saw Red Frost sitting on the sofa, fiddling with a data key. The current Red Frost wore a cold expression devoid of her usual cheerful demeanor. You're finally here, my almighty vice commander, Red Frost said, a hint of curiosity appearing on her cold face. May I know if my esteemed vice commander can answer me one question? What on earth have you done to provoke 15 third-tier mobile cities to initiate a city battle with us? All of them will even be arriving together in 7 days. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3502, Chapter 576, Sanctuary's Curse. Chapter 3502, Chapter 576, Sanctuary's Curse. Chapter 576, Sanctuary's Curse. Red Frost spoke without emotion, her indifferent voice adding a layer of frost to the room's atmosphere. Despite having already become a 1-star Grandmaster, Shifeng was still affected by this chilly atmosphere. 15 third-tier cities have declared war on us simultaneously. It's been centuries since such a thing happened in our region, Red Frost said with emphasis as she scrutinized Shifeng. The last time such a thing happened, Silver Frost City hadn't even become a second-tier city yet. If not for the city lord having a favorable view of you, do you know what kind of situation you would be facing right now? There might seem like a large number of third-tier mobile cities operating on the Starlight continent, but they were, in reality, rather limited in numbers. Normally, a third-tier city would only come across another third-tier city after wandering about for several months. And unless a new energy vein was discovered, it was highly unlikely for multiple third-tier cities to be present in the same location at the same time. Meanwhile, even a handful of third-tier cities competing over an energy vein would typically result in some of the involved cities losing a couple of the energy veins they originally owned. In severe cases, some of the involved cities might even be knocked back to their starting point and forced to survive with just one energy vein. In that state, they would be at risk of running out of energy at any moment and cease to be a city. As for the current situation where 15 third-tier cities were gathering to attack Star Lake City together, Red Frost couldn't even begin to imagine what would become of Star Lake City if this situation wasn't handled properly. I haven't done anything as over the top as you might think, Shifeng said, chuckling as he looked at Red Frost's solemn expression. If there's anything I've done, it's simply disrespecting the son of Silver Frost City's city lord. As soon as Shifeng finished speaking, Red Frost couldn't help but reveal a look of astonishment. You're saying you offended Xiao Quan? The son of the city lord overseeing the second-tier mobile city of our region? Red Frost couldn't help but seek confirmation. That's right. It's him, Shifeng said, nodding. How audacious of you, Red Frost commented before pursing her lips. That fellow's the most favored child of Silver Frost City's city lord. He's slated to inherit the city lord position in the future. If you have offended him, neither you nor Zero Wing can continue operating within Silver Frost City's territory. Not even our city lord can cover for you this time. Shifeng wasn't surprised by Red Frost's words. Instead, he smiled and said, the city lord might not be able to cover for me now, but what if Star Lake City becomes a second-tier mobile city? This time, the situation differed from when the Paimon conglomerate was applying pressure on Star Lake City. Star Lake City's jurisdiction fell under the Galaxy conglomerate, so the most the Paimon conglomerate could do was tempt other third-tier cities into attacking Star Lake City. If it tried to do anything more, the Galaxy conglomerate would no longer turn a blind eye to its actions. As for the incident this time, all parties involved fell within the Galaxy conglomerate's jurisdiction. So, no matter how much the conflict escalated, the Galaxy conglomerate would not intervene. A second-tier mobile city? Red Frost laughed. Do you think the Star Lake Legion has what it takes to win against 15 city legions simultaneously? City battles in the real world differed from battles in God's domain. Not only would participants have their physiques heavily suppressed, but even the weapons and equipment they could access highly depended on their mental strength standard. The stronger the weapons and equipment participants tried to manifest, the stronger their mental strength needed to be. So, one could say that a city battle was a mental strength competition. However, city battles could only be regarded as competitions of mental strength only if they were one-on-one scenarios. In a situation where both sides were limited to only 10 battle groups and 200 participants, there were limited means each side could employ after they scattered their forces across different occupation points. In a one versus many scenario, things would be different. It was especially so when one side consisted of 15 cities. The side with 15 cities could deploy 150 battle groups consisting of 3,000 participants. In such a situation, they would be more than capable of using various large-scale magic arrays. For example, they could use large-scale magic barriers to suppress the enemy. They could also use large-scale offensive magic arrays powered by several hundred magical class players to launch attacks that players of the same tier could not resist. They could even deploy large-scale defensive magic arrays that could easily stop attacks from players of the same tier. It was no exaggeration to say that 1 versus 1 simulation warfare and 1 versus many simulation warfare were two entirely different types of conflict. In the latter case, the impact that individual players could have on the battle would be diminished significantly. I cannot guarantee whether we can win. Looking at Red Frost, Shifeng contemplated for a moment before asking, if you were to recover your peak strength, how likely are you to win the Tier 6 battle, Commander Red Frost? Recover my peak strength. Red Frost couldn't help but look at Shifeng curiously for a moment when she heard his question. Then, she laughed and said, do you have a way to let me recover? Do you even know what kind of injury I have suffered? The source of your body's mana has been damaged, and it has led to the severe weakening of your mana's strength, right? Shifeng said, chuckling. According to the rumors floating about in Star Lake City, Red Frost possessed astonishing talent. Yet, she plummeted from grace after suffering some kind of injury during her campaign in the 12 Sanctuaries. Meanwhile, based on his observations during the last city battle, Shifeng found that, despite being at Tier 6, Red Frost's mana was abnormally thin. He also noticed that she didn't make use of any mana throughout the entire battle, relying only on her weapon, equipment, and techniques. This was a very bizarre way to fight for a pseudo-great Grandmaster. The only explanation Shifeng could come up with to explain this situation was that Red Frost had suffered damage to her mana source, which, in turn, led to a drastic decrease in her mana's strength. This was a phenomenon he had heard of before, and it could be said to be a type of curse in the 12 Sanctuaries. Without the proper means to resolve it, players would be stuck with it forever. The curse would follow them, even if they started a new account. Originally, Shifeng didn't have any way of combating this curse. Unless Red Frost could kill the person who cursed her, her mana would be permanently weakened. However, after learning about the Western continent's mana purification techniques, he was confident he could resolve Red Frost's problem with ease. Do you truly have a solution? Red Frost shot up from her seat and stared intently at Shifeng, the excitement in her eyes very apparent. The Sanctuary's curse was something she had never mentioned to anyone. She would also never use mana, even during normal battles, and she would only fight while relying on her basic attributes. Even if others took notice of her strange behavior, they would only think that it was her style of combat. They wouldn't suspect a problem with her mana. I wouldn't have brought it up if I didn't have a solution, Shifeng asserted. So, once again, how confident are you in winning the Tier 6 battle if you can recover your peak strength, Commander Red Frost? I'm sure you know that fighting multiple cities simultaneously is a completely different experience from fighting just one city. There are many more means our opponents can employ, so the battle isn't something the individual player can influence easily. After pondering for a moment, Red Frost answered, if I can recover my peak strength, I would probably have a 30 to 40% chance of winning the Tier 6 battle. Up to 40%. Shifeng was a little surprised by Red Frost's answer. Originally, he felt that, even if he looked at the situation optimistically, Red Frost would only have a 20% chance of victory. Moreover, this was built on the foundation that Red Frost was a pseudo-great Grandmaster. What if we add in a battle group that's fully equipped with legendary weapons and equipment? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3503, Chapter 577, On the Basis That I Am Black Flame. Chapter 3503, Chapter 577, On the Basis That I Am Black Flame. Chapter 577, On the Basis That I Am Black Flame. A battle group fully equipped with legendary weapons and equipment. When Red Frost heard Shifeng's words, she felt he was joking with her. Whether it was legendary weapons or legendary equipment, both were incredibly rare and precious in the greater god's domain. Even upper-ranking hegemonic powers would rarely be willing to let their developing paragons use these items. Take Star Lake Legion, for example. The entire Legion only had 3 legendary weapons and equipment in its possession, and all 3 were on loan from the City Lord after he dug into his own pockets to acquire them. The Star Lake Legion couldn't even afford to fully equip a player in legendary items, let alone a full battle group consisting of 20 participants. In fact, not even top-ranking second-tier mobile cities would dare to think of fully equipping a 20-man battle group in legendary items. Indeed, a battle group fully equipped with legendary weapons and equipment. Shifeng nodded. If you can have such a battle group under you, how confident are you at winning, Commander Redfrost? Normally, only upper-ranking hegemonic powers and above could possibly accomplish the feat of fully equipping a 20-man battle group in legendary weapons and equipment. Ordinary hegemonic powers and corporations operating in third-tier cities shouldn't even consider doing such a thing. However, he was in possession of the Divine Engraver legacy. He was also a basic apprentice Divine Engraver. So long as he could further develop the strength of his mana by a little bit, it shouldn't be difficult for him to learn how to draw intermediate divine patterns in 7 days. Previously, he had already mastered drawing a set of basic divine patterns. The only reason he didn't attempt to learn how to draw intermediate divine patterns and become a bona fide divine engraver was that he lacked god crystals. If he wanted to learn a set of intermediate divine patterns from the Divine Engraver legacy, he would need to spend 50 god crystals. This was not an amount that the average power could take out. Back then, he would have needed to sell everything he owned just to gather the required 50 god crystals. Not to mention, becoming a bona fide divine engraver wasn't his priority back then. So, he didn't bother to invest too much time and resources into the endeavor. Now, though, not only did the Green God Corporation secretly gather a group of lifestyle talents for him, but he had also received a large amount of funds. He could begin nurturing a large batch of players into apprentice divine engravers at any time, and it wouldn't be long before these players became apprentice divine engravers. If he couldn't become an official divine engraver before that happened, he wouldn't be able to carry out his subsequent plans. After all, he couldn't possibly spend 50 god crystals to let someone else learn from the Book of Eternity in his place. The cheapest and safest way to carry out his plans would be if he learned how to draw intermediate divine patterns himself. Meanwhile, once he could draw intermediate divine patterns, he would be able to strengthen fragmented legendary items. At that time, he would simply have to strengthen a battle group fully equipped with fragmented legendary items. Then, he would have himself a battle group that possessed basic attributes rivaling a battle group fully equipped with legendary items. Moreover, he wouldn't have to worry about applying too much extra burden on the participant's mental state. Of course, to keep his ability to draw divine patterns a secret as much as possible, he still couldn't reveal too many. A 20-man battle group was about the limit. If he strengthened the weapons and equipment of only 20 participants, he could still justify it by claiming to have purchased a batch of intermediate divine patterns at an exorbitant price. Any more, and he would have a hard time explaining himself. If he were to accidentally expose to the various powers his ability to draw intermediate divine patterns, it'd be the end of the road for him. Whether it was Demon's Gate or the Seven Luminaries Alliance, every apex power would try to capture him at all costs to take control of the intermediate divine patterns in his possession. With his current strength, there would be nothing he could do to resist. If you can get such a battle group for me, there is nothing else I can say. Grinning, Red Frost patted her well-endowed chest and expressed confidently, "If I still can't secure victory in the Tier 6 battle, I will help you with anything you need in the future without question." Looking at Red Frost's seductive and noble appearance, Shifeng suddenly felt that if Blackie and the others were to learn of Red Frost's suggestion, they would 100% hope that the coalition of 15 cities would win against Star Lake City. Setting aside the fact that Red Frost was a stunning beauty, just the fact that she was a pseudo-great grandmaster was already enough to tempt any upper-ranking hegemonic power and pseudo-apex power into recruiting her. In the greater world, 3-star grandmasters could control a city, while great grandmasters could influence the direction of an entire continent's development. A great grandmaster could also control a first-tier city and command respect from the various upper-ranking hegemonic powers and conglomerates. If you have no problems with the Tier 6 battle, winning the city battle also wouldn't be a problem, Shifeng hurriedly said when he noticed Red Frost starting to scrutinize him again. After the city battle, Star Lake City will be able to take a leap forward and become a second-tier city. I'm sure the City Lord will be very interested in my proposal. The lifelong dream of many 3-star grandmasters was to preside over a second-tier mobile city. This was so they could cross the large hurdle before them and enter the realm of great grandmasters. No matter how affluent a third-tier city was, it still had far too few energy resources to supplement the birth of a great grandmaster. Even the most energy-rich location in a third-tier city would only be comparable to the central district of a second-tier city, and it was still far from matching the most energy-rich location of a second-tier city. Not to mention, a second-tier city's city lord enjoyed much greater status in the God's Domain Association than a third-tier city's city lord. The God's Domain Association was an incredibly mysterious organization in the greater world. Nobody knew about the association's origins, but everyone knew that the association could produce great grandmasters. Or, more specifically, apart from certain special opportunities in God's domain, the only way a person could become a great grandmaster in the greater world was by relying on the God's Domain Association. In fact, the majority of the greater world's great grandmasters only existed because of the association. Star Lake City's city lord was already old, and his chances of becoming a great grandmaster were slim. If he wanted to achieve a breakthrough and prolong his lifespan and youth, his only option would be to become the city lord of a second-tier city. You're right. Returning to her seat, Red Frost crossed her legs and nodded. Then, she smiled and said, "The city lord will not be able to resist a chance to become a second-tier city's city lord. He will even be willing to stake his life for it. But, the problem is, on what basis do you expect us to believe you can fulfill any of your promises?" Shi Feng's proposal indeed tempted Red Frost. Her mind had even temporarily fallen into disarray because of it. However, she was a pseudo-great grandmaster. She was also the Silver Lake Legion's commander, and she wielded the most authority in Star Lake City after the city lord. She naturally wouldn't trust someone so easily. Not to mention, Shi Feng's offer sounded too good to be true. Shi Feng also sat back down. Then, looking at Red Frost in the eye, he calmly said, "On the basis that I am Black Flame." Shi Feng did not speak in a loud voice. Yet, his words had seemingly stopped time as the lounge fell completely silent. "If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 3504, Chapter 578, Regional Bosses Loot. Chapter 3504, Chapter 578, Regional Bosses Loot. Chapter 578, Regional Bosses Loot. Black Flame? Your Zero Wings Guild leader, Black Flame? Red Frost shot up from her seat once again and looked at Shi Feng in disbelief. This time, she strongly believed Shi Feng was joking with her. Black Flame had already become a household name in the greater God's domain. Black Flame was also why she and the City Lord had a very optimistic view of Zero Wing's future. It was especially so for Red Frost after she took an in-depth look into Black Flame's growth process. The only word she could use to describe Black Flame was shocking. First, Black Flame had gotten into the Luminous Glory list. Later, he entered the Eternal Realm and single-handedly suppressed several upper-ranking powers and holy race powers. Then, just when everyone thought Black Flame's success was only a product of luck, he appeared in the miniature ancient world and accomplished something even more astonishing. Despite being a Tier 5 player, Black Flame had single-handedly slain a Tier 6 Berserker god and slaughtered tens of thousands of experts across a distance of hundreds of kilometers. After the battle, he was even ranked 11th on the Sacred Glory list, granting him great fame across the greater God's domain for some time. However, all of this was not important. As a former Sacred Glory list expert, Red Frost knew that the ranking list was merely the tip of the iceberg. Many talented paragons were still not ranked on the Sacred Glory list. More specifically, these were the talents secretly nurtured by the various upper-ranking hegemonic powers and above. Meanwhile, in the eyes of these talents, the Sacred Glory list was nothing more than a joke to entertain the masses. It wasn't something worth taking seriously at all. But after conducting in-depth research on Black Flame, Red Frost also realized that the Sacred Glory list had only revealed a small portion of Black Flame's true potential. What was truly frightening about Black Flame was his rate of growth. Black Flame's growth was simply unheard of. When Black Flame first entered the Sacred Glory list, he was merely suspected to be a fifth-floor expert. Yet, even though only a short time had passed, he was now in existence who had mastered a gold combat technique. Even back in her heyday, her growth would be insignificant compared to Black Flame's. At one point, Red Frost even suspected that Black Flame might be an old monster who had decided to come out of retirement and establish a guild out of boredom. Yet, she was now being told that Black Flame, Zero Wings' mythical guild leader and the Lord of War goddesses, was actually a young man in his 30s, and he wasn't even a mental strength master not long ago. How could she possibly believe this? Indeed, it is, Shifeng said, smiling and nodding as he looked at Red Frost's shocked expression. Will that be enough to prove I can fulfill my promises? He didn't find Red Frost's reaction particularly strange. Anyone who bothered to do some research would more than likely assume that Black Flame was someone of significant age. After all, Black Flame's rate of growth was highly abnormal. Many people even suspected that Black Flame might have originated from some ancient power. Otherwise, how could he be so bold as to challenge multiple pseudo-apex powers? Unfortunately, no matter how everyone racked their minds, they would probably never imagine that he was a reincarnator, much less a reincarnator who had reincarnated more than once. How can I trust that you are Black Flame? Red Frost sternly asked, her previously cheerful and charming appearance nowhere to be seen. Simple. Tapping on his watch, Shifeng summoned a holographic panel displaying his god's domain profile. I can't possibly falsify my god's domain ID, right? While exposing his identity as Black Flame came with risks, it was a much less significant secret to expose compared to the Divine Engraver legacy. After all, in the various powers' eyes, Black Flame was merely a developing monster. As a Tier 5 player, Black Flame couldn't even pose a significant threat to upper-ranking hegemonic powers, let alone pseudo-apex and apex powers. However, Black Flame's identity held significant meaning for Red Frost, the Star Lake Legion's commander. This was because only those who had come into personal contact with him would know how abnormal his rate of growth truly was. The worth of his future potential easily surpassed the worth of a second-tier city. You really are Black Flame. When Red Frost saw the ID displayed on the holographic panel, she couldn't help but look at Shifeng as if she had just seen a priceless treasure. Aren't you afraid I'll leak your identity? The Paimon conglomerate still has a bounty on your head, and not only has the bounty grown to 1 billion star coins, but it also includes a permanent residential slot in a first-tier city. I doubt you will be tempted by such trifling rewards, Commander Red Frost, Shifeng said, chuckling. If you could be so easily tempted, you would never have stayed in Star Lake City. You would have long moved into a first-tier city and enjoyed much greater status in the greater world. No matter how weak Red Frost had become in God's domain, it did not change the fact that she was a pseudo-great grandmaster in the real world. This alone was enough to net her a core executive position in any pseudo-apex power. Had she taken on such a position, she could have promptly moved into one of the high and mighty special-tier mobile cities, let alone a first-tier mobile city. You are correct. Red Frost nodded, a hint of nostalgia flashing in her eyes. Then, she took a deep breath and continued, since you have proven yourself to be Black Flame, I will no longer question the feasibility of tackling the 15 cities. I will also personally speak to the City Lord about your proposal. Black Flame had single-handedly annihilated the experts of 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers in the miniature ancient world. So, defeating 15 third-tier city legions would be nothing more than repeating that feat. Not to mention, Black Flame had stated that he could help her recover to her peak. I will have to trouble you with that, then, Commander Red Frost, Shifeng expressed his gratitude. No trouble, it's no trouble at all, Red Frost said, smiling. Just don't forget your promise to me. Naturally. I guarantee you'll recover to your peak in 7 days, Shifeng affirmed. He was rather confident in obtaining a mana purification technique in 7 days. After all, mana purification techniques weren't particularly rare on the Western continent. It was even possible to exchange for mana purification techniques using resources in 7 Luminaries Town. Of course, bronze purification techniques were still a little tricky to obtain. This could be seen by how only a minority of the veteran players operating in 7 Luminaries Town had learned a bronze purification technique. If he couldn't get his hands on a bronze purification technique in 7 days, he would have to settle with exchanging a common purification technique. Even if it couldn't resolve Red Frost's problem completely, it should more or less recover some of her Tier 6 mana's strength. Following this, Shifeng and Red Frost spent the next 3 hours discussing the details of their cooperation. This also meant that 6 hours had passed in God's domain, so Shifeng promptly returned to his living quarters and logged back into the game as soon as he concluded his discussion with Red Frost. Everyone in the Dawnlight party had agreed to log back into the game at a specific time. If he let the others wait for him for too long, they might fall into danger. After all, the plane of fallen gods remained the Holy Race players' territory. The Holy Race players would not hesitate to join forces to subjugate any human players they discovered on the map. Hence, every second and minute a human player spent on the plane of fallen gods was incredibly dangerous. Plane of fallen gods, you're back, Brother Black Flame. When Sky Pivot saw Shifeng appearing, he solemnly said, "Now that everyone's here, we will split the loot according to our previous agreement." "No problem." Shifeng nodded when he saw the excitement on Sky Pivot's face. The half-snake in general had dropped 11 items previously. However, as they were in a rush before, they quickly collected the items closest to them before fleeing to this cave. Then, they hastily logged out of the game after setting up a magic barrier on the cave's entrance. So, even until now, nobody knew what they had obtained from the regional boss. Subsequently, under Sky Pivot's command, everyone took out the items they looted. Immediately afterward, the density of mana and various other energies in the cave started to rise rapidly. Even eternal energy had started to gather from all directions. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3505, Chapter 579, Soul Blood. Chapter 3505, Chapter 579, Soul Blood. Chapter 579, Soul Blood. What dense eternal energy! Incredible! The eternal energy gathered here is already denser than when we defeated the final boss of that Hell Mode team dungeon. Sky Pivot and the other original members of the Dawnlight party promptly lost their calm when they sensed the change in their surrounding environment. Is that really the case, leader? Has the loot of this regional boss gathered denser eternal energy than a Hell Mode team dungeon's final boss? Billowing Water asked out of curiosity. She wasn't aware of the Western continent's loot situation, so she didn't share the same reaction as Sky Pivot and the others. In God's domain, the higher the quality of an item, the more mana it could attract from the surroundings. But judging by the reactions of Sky Pivot and the others, although the half-snake in general's loot had also attracted a lot of mana, the standard of judging an item's quality was evidently based on the eternal energy the item attracted. "It is much denser," Sky Pivot said, nodding. "Our party previously collaborated with a couple of other parties to raid a Hell Mode team dungeon, but the final boss's loot only doubled the density of the surrounding eternal energy. The affected area was also only limited to a 10-yard radius," Moonbamboo explained. "But as you can see, these items have increased the surrounding eternal energy's density by several times. If not for the magic barrier we've set up, the area they can influence might even increase to a radius of several hundred yards. Essentially, we've struck gold this time." "Indeed." Looking at the 11 items on the ground, Budding Leaf sighed ruefully and said, "When we participated in the joint dungeon raid, a total of 8 noteworthy items dropped, and our party only received 2. Our party even lost 2 members during the raid. Even so, we still ended up profiting significantly. But what we got from that raid is nothing compared to our current harvest." The Dawnlight party had obtained 2 valuable items from the Hell Mode team dungeon they raided. Of them, one was a bronze mana purification technique, while the other was a combat-ranked secret treasure. The bronze purification technique was given to Moonbamboo, the vice party leader of the team, while the combat-ranked secret treasure was given to Sky Pivot. After receiving their respective treasures, both Moonbamboo and Sky Pivot saw a significant increase in strength. Even after accounting for the loss of their 2 party members, the Dawnlight party's overall strength still increased significantly, allowing the party to retain its status in 7 Luminaries Town. Enough talking. The barrier might be able to prevent the Holy Race players outside from detecting us, but some of them might have scouting skills that can see through the barrier's concealment. "Let's quickly appraise these items before trouble finds us," Sky Pivot urged. Moon Bamboo nodded and promptly began to use her identification skill to appraise the 11 items. Many of the Holy Race's combat methods and skills were incomprehensible to human players. As a result, many parties failed to survive their encounters with Holy Race players. So, it was best to avoid contact with Holy Race players as much as possible. 30 seconds later, Moon Bamboo finished appraising the 11 items, the speed of her appraisal astonishing even Shifeng. "We really lucked out this time," Moon Bamboo exclaimed. "Other than 4 common secret treasures and 2 legendary materials, we also got 1 bronze purification technique and 4 combat secret treasures." "There's a bronze purification technique and 4 combat secret treasures?" Sky Pivot and the others couldn't help but be astonished. Billowing Water found this outcome especially shocking. Whether it was the bronze purification technique or combat secret treasures, both were extremely rare on the Western continent. According to her understanding, even 7 Luminaries Town's veteran parties wouldn't necessarily own a bronze purification technique or a combat secret treasure. Most were still stuck with common purification technique and common secret treasures. Yet, their party had obtained 1 bronze purification technique and 4 combat secret treasures from killing just 1 regional boss. This was an unbelievable harvest. "Brother Black Flame, as per our agreement and your contribution to the party, this bronze purification technique belongs to you," Sky Pivot calmly said. "Besides that, you and Billow can have priority in choosing 1 item from the remaining items." Moon Bamboo, Budding Leaf, and Splashing Fire did not object to Sky Pivot's arrangement. They simply looked at the party's 2 newcomers. Although they had reaped a huge harvest this time, Sky Pivot had already informed them of the promises he previously made to Shifeng and Billowing Water. They had also agreed to Sky Pivot's decision before they set out, so they weren't about to kick up a fuss now. Not to mention, even if they conceded 3 items, the rest of the loot was still plenty astonishing. Meanwhile, Billowing Water couldn't help but look at Shifeng enviously when she heard he would be receiving a bronze purification technique. 4 newcomers like themselves to survive on the Western continent, it was imperative that they strengthened their mana as soon as possible. Not to mention, a bronze purification technique could undoubtedly provide a huge increase in strength. If she could get her hands on one and learn it successfully, she was confident she could enter 7 Luminaries Town's upper ranks. "Would you like to make a trade with me, Miss Billow?" Shifeng quietly asked when he noticed Billowing Water's yearning for the bronze purification technique. "We previously agreed that half of my earnings in the Forbidden Zone would belong to you. If I give this bronze purification technique to you, can we settle the matter? Are you really willing to trade this bronze purification technique for half of your harvests later?" Billowing Water asked, confused by Shifeng's offer. Even though she hadn't spent much time in 7 Luminaries Town, she knew how valuable a bronze purification technique was. It was highly unlikely they would get another bronze purification technique in their subsequent exploration. So, Shifeng would be losing out big time if he were to trade away his bronze purification technique to offset the earnings he needed to split with her afterward. "Of course," Shifeng said, smiling. "While the bronze purification technique is valuable, it isn't something I must have right now. Moreover, if you can strengthen your mana, it will make subsequent explorations in this party easier. We will also have a greater chance of obtaining a second bronze purification technique and more precious items." "Okay. I agree to your offer," Billowing Water said, finding Shifeng's reasoning to be valid. If she could learn a bronze purification technique, the Dawnlight party's overall strength would further increase. Afterward, they would have an easier time exploring the plane of fallen gods, and their chances of obtaining better loot would also increase. If another bronze purification technique truly did drop, Shifeng would have bet correctly and earned much more than he originally would have. Immediately, Shifeng handed the bronze purification technique he obtained to Billowing Water and strode toward the 10 remaining items. "I'll choose this one," Shifeng said as he picked up a crystal vial containing a drop of scarlet liquid. The scarlet liquid was called Soul Blood, and it was one of the 2 legendary materials dropped by the regional boss. Seeing this, Billowing Water couldn't help but be surprised once again. This time, though, she completely failed to understand why Shifeng would choose a legendary material instead of the more precious combat secret treasures. However, What Billowing Water did not know was that the reason Shifeng had decided to trade away the precious bronze purification technique in the first place was precisely so that he could keep this unassuming soul blood. Are you sure you want to choose the soul blood, Brother Black Flame? When Sky Pivot saw Shifeng choosing the crystal vial, he couldn't help but seek further confirmation from Shifeng. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3506, Chapter 580, Tier 6 Advanced Concentration. Chapter 3506, Chapter 580, Tier 6 Advanced Concentration. Chapter 580, Tier 6 Advanced Concentration. Brother Blackflame, while the description of soul blood states that it can be used to permanently improve a player's concentration, its actual effects are minimal. Splashing Fire sincerely explained when he saw Shifeng using his privilege to acquire the soul blood. Quite a few parties in town have obtained the soul blood before, and they were all deceived by its described effects initially. They all thought they had gotten their hands on some great treasure, and one of the top-ranking teams had even paid a significant amount of money to purchase the soul blood from others. However, out of everyone who has used soul blood, not a single person managed to raise their concentration standards. 1. It was quite a well-known incident back then, Budding Leaf added. The team originally intended to use soul blood to raise 3 of its newcomers' concentration standards from Tier 6 Basic to Tier 6 Intermediate since, after factoring in the help of a mana purification technique, the team would promptly gain 3 more capable combatants. However, even though all 3 of those newcomers were originally already stuck at the limits of the Tier 6 Basic standard, none of them managed to raise their concentration to the Tier 6 Intermediate standard. The outcome nearly drove everyone on that team to madness. Moon Bamboo also nodded, expressing her agreement with Splashing Fire and Budding Leaf. By now, they had already regarded Shifeng as one of their own. Not to mention, as a half-step Tier 6 expert, Shifeng might become even stronger than Sky Pivot once he learned a mana purification technique. So, it was in their best interests to dissuade him from a bad decision and form a good relationship with him. Even at the limits of the Tier 6 Basic standard, they didn't achieve a breakthrough. Billowing Water was taken aback when she heard Budding Leaf's explanation. Previously, she, too, had contemplated whether she should go for the soul blood. After all, if she could push her concentration to the Tier 6 Intermediate standard, paired with the bronze mana purification technique, she could reach the half-step Tier 6 standard, or possibly even higher. It's fine. I'll choose it, Shifeng stated firmly as he continued holding on to the soul blood. Soul blood was a material unique to the Eternal Realm, and it was available in scarce quantities. During his previous life, any soul blood that appeared on the market would be immediately snatched up by the various pseudo-apex and apex powers. Other powers wouldn't even have a chance to obtain one. Honestly, Shifeng had still been skeptical when he first saw the vial of soul blood previously. After all, how could he come across one so easily? However, after Moon Bamboo appraised it, he promptly resolved to make a trade with Billowing Water. Soul Blood's introduction was true in that it could be used to improve a player's concentration standard. However, what the introduction didn't mention was how players should go about using Soul Blood. Because of this, during the initial phase of Soul Blood's discovery, players would ingest Soul Blood directly and receive negligible improvements to their concentration. This, in turn, led to Soul Blood being treated as garbage by players and left in a corner to collect dust for a considerable amount of time after its initial discovery. During his previous life, it wasn't until players discovered a library that had survived in the Eternal Realm since the mythical era did the various powers become aware of the correct way to utilize Soul Blood. When that discovery was made, it caused a sensation throughout the entire Greater Gods domain. According to records found in the ancient library, there were 3 ways to utilize Soul Blood. The first method was to ingest it directly. This method yielded the worst results, and it could only let players with concentration below the Tier 6 standard achieve a 1-rank improvement. Moreover, this method would only be effective once, with subsequent consumptions of Soul Blood not yielding any improvements. And if players with Tier 6 concentration tried to ingest Soul Blood directly, they would only receive negligible improvements. The second method was to refine Soul Blood into a soul amplification potion. When players consumed the soul amplification potion, they would see a permanent increase of 1 or 2 ranks to their concentration standard. While players of all concentration standards could use this second method, each player could only consume 1 soul amplification potion in their lifetime. The third method was to merge with the soul blood by dripping it onto one's eye. This method would cause players to experience scorching pain like no other in their souls. So long as players could endure the pain and avoid losing consciousness throughout the merging process, the soul blood would thoroughly merge with their souls and permanently improve their concentration by 1 rank. Likewise, each player could only use this method once in their lifetime. Of the 3 methods, the second method was both the safest and most effective. Coming in second in effectiveness was the third method, but it was also the riskiest of the 3 methods. However, regardless of the method, players could only try one. Once they successfully applied one of the 3 methods, they would become immune to the effects of soul blood. Currently, producing the soul amplification potion was out of the question for Shifeng. Firstly, he didn't have the recipe. Secondly, even if he did have the recipe, he would need a great grandmaster alchemist to produce the potion for him, and it would be done at a low success rate of 30 to 40%. Hence, he could only go with the third method of utilizing the soul blood. It was also the most common method used by players who had obtained soul blood in his previous life. Although the soul amplification potion could improve concentration by up to 2 ranks, the opportunity for players with Tier 6 concentration to permanently increase their concentration by 1 rank was enough to make countless experts lose their minds. It was especially so for players operating on the Western continent. Such an improvement would allow players to achieve a qualitative improvement. When Sky Pivot and the others saw Shifeng's determination, they no longer tried to dissuade him. Instead, they proceeded with allocating the remaining loot based on party contribution. Unsurprisingly, the 4 combat secret treasures were distributed to Sky Pivot, Moon Bamboo, Billowing Water, and Shifeng. As for the 4 common secret treasures, they were evenly distributed between Splashing Fire and Budding Leaf. Once the party finished distributing the loot, Sky Pivot promptly summoned a dozen rat-sized stealth summons and scattered them outside the cave. When it came to scouting, these stealth summons were as capable as rangers and assassins. With one eye closed, Sky Pivot observed the situation outside the cave through the eyes of his summons. Then, he solemnly said, "There are still a couple of holy race teams outside. I'm afraid we'll have to wait until they move some distance away before we can leave. Sure enough, those people won't give up so easily. I guess we just have to have a competition of patience with them like always," Splashing Fire said, unperturbed by this outcome. Then, he went to sit in a corner of the cave and started researching the common secret treasures he just obtained. As for everyone else, they, too, began researching their respective harvests while awaiting further orders from the party leader. "I guess I can also use this opportunity to raise my concentration," Shifeng thought when he saw that everyone was busy with their respective affairs. Then, he stepped into a dark corner of the cave and cautiously dripped the soul blood onto his right eye. Immediately after the scarlet liquid made contact with his eyeball, Shifeng immediately felt rampant energy invading his soul and trying to corrode his entire being. In just an instant, Shifeng felt like flames were scorching his body, inside and outside. "It really hurts," Shifeng mentally exclaimed as he stared at the scarlet veins that appeared all over his body. He didn't think merging with the soul blood would be so excruciatingly painful. If not for the countless hardships he experienced in his previous life, he would have probably screamed in agony right about now. However, amidst the pain, Shifeng could also feel strands of eternal energy flowing into the depths of his immortal soul and improving its resilience. The painful experience lasted for a full 20 minutes before disappearing, leaving Shifeng with a sense of liberation. Immediately afterward, the sound of a system notification entered his ears. "System, congratulations. You have achieved Tier 6 Advanced Concentration while still being at Tier 5. Rewarding Mental Dominator title. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 3507, Chapter 581, Divine Kingdom's Resurgence. Chapter 3507, Chapter 581, Divine Kingdom's Resurgence. Chapter 581, Divine Kingdom's Resurgence. Mental Dominator? Shifeng was surprised by the title he abruptly obtained. Mental Dominator. When the title is equipped, it weakens all mental attacks received by 20%. The effect of weakening mental attacks received by 20% might seem insignificant, but that would only be true if he were still on the Eternal Continent. On the Western Continent, the Mental Dominator title could yield him extraordinary benefits. Compared to the Eternal Continent's monsters, the Western Continent's monsters weren't all that different in basic attributes. However, because of their mastery over mental attacks, they were vastly more difficult to deal with. If he were to equip the Mental Dominator title, he would raise his resistance to mental attacks to a new level. If he were to face the half-snake in general again, he wouldn't even need to split his attention to deal with the regional boss's mental attacks. Now that my concentration has reached the Tier 6 Advanced, I can probably execute Sword of Space without channeling my mana for a long time, Shifeng theorized when he felt his control over his mana improving significantly. Then, he unsheathed the Shadow Incinerator and thought, I wonder if I can break the second seal. When he previously undid the Shadow Incinerator's first seal, the weapon had gained the might of a legendary weapon. If he could undo the second seal, the godly relic could undoubtedly elevate his overall strength to a whole new level. At that time, even if he had to roam the Western Continent by himself, he would face far fewer problems. 1 time. 2 times. 3 times. Shifeng tried attacking the mental nodes on the Shadow Incinerator's second seal multiple times using mental condensation in quick succession. However, the mental nodes remained completely unfazed. It seems I was hoping for too much. Shifeng wryly smiled when he saw how he had utterly failed to break the second seal. The Shadow Incinerator's second seal was of a much higher rank than the first seal. Moreover, he sensed that the effectiveness of the mental condensation technique taught to him by the primordial abyssal god had weakened significantly after his concentration reached the Tier 6 Advanced standard. The technique did not strengthen his concentration to the Tier 6 peak standard and only improved it by half a rank. If he wanted to break the second seal, he would still have to raise his concentration by half a rank. Never mind. At least I won't have difficulties learning how to inscribe intermediate divine engravings now. Shifeng quickly got over his disappointment and regained his calm. After all, his primary goal in trading away the bronze mana purification technique for the soulblood was never to undo the Shadow Incinerator's second seal. Instead, it was to upgrade his concentration to the Tier 6 Advanced standard so that he could learn how to inscribe intermediate divine engravings quicker and have an easier time roaming the Western Continent by himself. Admittedly, he could have an easier time killing legendary-ranked regional bosses if he operated with the Dawnlight Party. However, he was in possession of the Feather of Oath. So long as he could resist the mental attacks of the Western Continent's monsters, he could afford to explore higher-level maps and slay legendary-ranked world bosses by himself. Not only would he get to monopolize all of the loot, but the quality would also be vastly superior to that of regional bosses. Something's up. Everyone, gather. At this time, Sky Pivot suddenly disrupted the cave's tranquility, his command causing everyone to gather at the cave's entrance reflexively. What happened outside, leader? Splashing Fire asked, growing a little anxious when he saw Sky Pivot's unusually serious expression. Did the Holy Race players discover us? Their party of 6 might be strong, but the Holy Race players had many experts. Some of them could even contend against the likes of Sky Pivot. If 2 or 3 of such experts worked together, they could quickly take down Sky Pivot, let alone the rest of their party. No, that's not it, Sky Pivot said, shaking his head. Then, with a confused look, he continued, the Holy Race players outside are behaving strangely. It looks like they received a command of some sort, and they are now gathering in a particular direction. But I haven't sensed any signs of battle coming from the direction they are headed. They are heading in a direction without signs of battle? Shifeng had his curiosity piqued a little when he heard Sky Pivot's description. The Holy Race players were similar to human players in that they were split among numerous powers. Currently, the Holy Race players operating on the plane of fallen gods all came from different powers, so their relationship with each other was that of competitors. Because of this, whenever they started to gather in the same direction, it usually meant they had perceived signs of battle coming from that direction, and they intended to contest for loot. But if there were no signs of battle, it meant that no boss battles were taking place nearby. In that case, it was very strange for the holy race players to gather in the same direction. It still wouldn't make sense even if allies notified them about a boss battle taking place. If they were so far away that they couldn't perceive any signs of the battle in question, the battle would have long ended by the time they arrived at the scene, and there would be no point in them heading over. Wait, that's city? Before anyone could come to a conclusion, Sky Pivot suddenly exclaimed, a city appeared on the plain of fallen gods. Before Sky Pivot could continue speaking, a regional announcement rang in everyone's minds. Regional System Announcement. The sealed Divine Kingdom of Old has been opened. Divine Kingdom's Afterglow expansion pack activated. The announcement repeated 3 times, stunning everyone. During God's Domain's mythical era, countries that could be dubbed as a divine kingdom were countries ruled by gods, and they possessed civilizations and technologies far beyond the grasp of the modern era. No wonder the holy race players are rushing over there. A divine kingdom. This is undoubtedly the biggest opportunity the Western continent has to offer. Splashing Fire exclaimed ruefully. If we can secure even a tiny portion of what the divine kingdom has to offer, it will probably still be better than a regional boss's loot. Moon Bamboo nodded in agreement. Then, she looked at Sky Pivot and said, this is a rare opportunity, leader. Now that our party has grown much stronger, should we take a look too? Following Moon Bamboo's words, Splashing Fire, Budding Leaf, and Billowing Water also looked at Sky Pivot with hopeful and excited gazes. During the past half an hour, they had already equipped the secret treasures they had obtained. Billowing Water had also gained initial mastery over her bronze purification technique, putting her current strength close to Sky Pivot. Okay, let's go and take a look. After hesitating for a moment, Sky Pivot decided to take a gamble. Plain of Fallen Gods, Central Region. What should have been a vast forested plain was now dominated by a towering city. The city occupied the entirety of the Plain of Fallen Gods Central Region and awed all players who approached it with its mountain-like walls. It should be known that even the walls of holy cities would normally only reach a height of 100 meters. Yet, the city that occupied the Central Region had walls measuring thousands of meters in height. Even birds would need to fly a long time to reach the top of the walls and cross them. As for players who couldn't fly, these walls were akin to an insurmountable barrier. At this time, though, thousands of flying mounts filled the sky above the city. Each of these flying mounts was at Tier 4 or above, and standing on the back of these flying mounts were holy race players exuding astonishing auras. Even the weakest of these holy race players exuded auras on par with the average Tier 6 human player. As for the holy race players standing atop the several Tier 5 flying mounts positioned in the lead, their presence was akin to that of gods, and they exuded holy power that distorted the surrounding space. At this time, a level 164, Tier 5 middle-aged man with a solemn appearance could be seen approaching a young man on his Tier 5 flying mount. The young man had holy patterns marking his eyes, and the middle-aged man put on a respectful expression when he arrived before the young man. Lord Royal Thunder, all Tier 6 combatants operating in the Plain of Fallen Gods have already gathered. They number more than 50,000, and they are ready to comply with your orders, the middle-aged man reported. We have also discovered several human parties riding Tier 5 flying mounts secretly stalking us from 3,000 yards away. Should we eliminate them before we proceed? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3508, Chapter 582 Demon of Swords. Chapter 3508, Chapter 582 Demon of Swords. Chapter 582, Demon of Swords. Human parties? A look of interest appeared on the young man with patterned eyes. Then, he turned to the fair-skinned girl with an indifferent face standing next to him and asked, "Are there any noteworthy experts among them, Feather?" "You jest, Lord Thunder. There are no noteworthy experts among humans. They are merely a bunch of ants," the girl named Extreme Feather responded. "Currently, Only the chosen ones nurtured by the human's apex powers can put up a fight against me. Every other human is unlikely to survive a single move from me. Is that so? The young man named Royal Thunder couldn't help but lose interest after hearing Extreme Feather's answer. Then, he turned back to the middle-aged man and said, "In that case, quickly take care of those human parties. I don't wish to waste time on them." Royal Thunder had no doubts about Extreme Feather's words. Extreme Feather was one of the 9 great chosen ones under his command, and she was one of the key figures assisting him in securing his position within his family. When he initially heard that there were human players nearby, his first thought was to find a noteworthy opponent among them for Extreme Feather. After all, only by fighting strong opponents could Extreme Feather grow quicker. But if the opponents were merely insignificant ants, there was no need to waste time on them. Understood, the solemn middle-aged man responded before flying away with 1,000 holy race experts. Meanwhile, a little over 2,000 yards away, the various human parties operating on the plane of fallen gods had gathered together. Every party had used a Tier 5 group isolation scroll to conceal their presence. Unless one came very close to these parties, even 5th-floor experts would have difficulty noticing them. "It seems the other side has discovered us, Pivot," a robust man riding atop a Tier 5 Void Manta commented when he saw the 1,000 or so holy race experts flying over from a distance. Then, he looked at a nearby male summoner and smiled, saying, "Will you be needing our help this time?" "Careful not to eat your own words, Fireball," Sky Pivot said in exasperation as he looked at the robust man. According to 7 Luminaries Town's party rankings, Dawnlight is 1 rank above Fire Demon. You should be more concerned about your own party right now. In 7 Luminaries Town, the Fire Demon party and the Dawnlight party could be considered rivals. However, not once did the Fire Demon party ever manage to surpass the Dawnlight party in rankings. "Times have changed, Pivot," the robust man named Fireball said with a nonchalant smile. "Our party has recently welcomed a strong newcomer, so our strength is no longer the same as before. Not to mention, didn't Dawnlight lose 2 members some time ago? Do you think your party is the only one with new members?" Sky Pivot said disdainfully. "Hey, not everyone is equal," Fireball said before delightedly pointing at a female swordsman with an enticing figure. "Our newcomer is extraordinary. While she might be young in age, she has already reached the half-step Tier 6 standard. Even an old guy like you might have a tough time against her." "Hello, party leader Sky Pivot. I am Kang Shaw, the Fire Demon party's newest member." Kang Shaw introduced herself to Sky Pivot in a seductive voice. "I am still new to 7 Luminaries Town, so I hope you can look out for me in the future." "Hello. I am Sky Pivot, the Dawnlight party's leader." Sky Pivot hurriedly introduced himself as well when he saw how polite Kang Shaw was. "Kang Shaw." While looking at the Fire Demon party's seductive new member, Shifeng suddenly recalled a name from his previous life. Demon of Swords, Kang Shaw. She was one of the chosen ones nurtured by the Apex Power Demon's Gate. She became a 3-star mental strength grandmaster at a very young age, and she was also the youngest person to become a taboo in Demon's Gate's history. However, outside of Demon's Gate, few people had ever seen Kang Shaw's true appearance. It wasn't even possible to find Kang Shaw's battle records through public means. Even so, the 7 Luminaries Alliance had awarded Kang Shaw the title of Demon of Swords and described her as an existence on par with the 10 great sword gods. At one point during Shifeng's previous life, the Midnight Tea Party's legendary existence, Endless Scars, fought Kang Shaw. Although Endless Scars did not disclose the fight's result, Shifeng did learn one thing from Endless Scars. Only primordial gods could defeat Kang Shaw. The evaluation stunned Shifeng when he first heard it. Primordial gods were existences standing at the very apex of God's domain. Even among players regarded as taboos, very few could put up a fight against primordial gods, let alone stand shoulder to shoulder with primordial gods. While Shifeng wondered about Kang Shaw's true identity, Fireball, the Fire Demon party's leader, directed his Void Manta closer to the Dawnlight party. "What do you think, Pivot? Look at how polite our newcomer is," Fireball boasted. "I can also tell you that Kang Shaw isn't just polite. She can absolutely stun you once she takes action." So long as your party is willing to admit defeat, we wouldn't mind helping you out this time. Otherwise, you might not even get past the city gates before getting sent back to the Eternal Continent. Stun me. Sky Pivot couldn't help but laugh. Then, he pointed at Shifeng and said, "Do you know who our party's newcomer is?" "Who is he?" Fire Bull responded with an expression of disdain. "Black Flame. The Lord of War Goddesses, ranked 11th on the Sacred Glory list," Sky Pivot proudly stated. "Once those holy race experts arrive, just watch as we enter the city ahead of you." Sky Pivot wasn't worried about the approaching holy race experts. Aerial combat was different from ground combat. It was especially so when everyone currently lacked the ability to fly on their own on the Western continent. In such a situation, it was easy for several hundred players to form an impenetrable encirclement on the ground. However, in the air, where everyone had to rely on flying mounts to stay airborne, the best the holy race experts could accomplish was to have several players attack from up close. Everyone else could only rely on long-range bombardment. In such a situation, their party could simply rely on defensive magic arrays to defend against incoming attacks while they charged into the city. Meanwhile, once they entered the city, the monsters that infested the city would greatly diminish the advantage of numbers. At that time, the holy race players would have a much more difficult time keeping them pinned. 11th on the Sacred Glory list. Fire Bull laughed. Fire Bull had previously thought the Dawnlight Party had recruited someone incredible for Sky Pivot to boast about so much. However, it would seem that he had overestimated his old rival and the Dawnlight Party as a whole. The party must be in dire straits if it was treating a Sacred Glory expert as a treasure. Black Flame. Meanwhile, Kang Sho's gaze promptly locked onto Shifeng when she heard Sky Pivot's words, and she couldn't help but lick her lips as she scrutinized Shifeng. "How interesting. So, you are Zero Wing's guild leader? I wonder what would become of Zero Wing if I were to kill you now?" Kang Sho's words were like the devil's whispers, sending shivers down the spines of everyone present. Everyone felt as if a sharp sword was hanging over their heads, ready to fall and claim their lives at any moment. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3509, Chapter 583, Sweeping the Sky with One Slash. Chapter 3509, Chapter 583, Sweeping the Sky with One Slash. Chapter 583, Sweeping the Sky with One Slash. Following Kang Sho's words, Fire Bull's anxiety levels promptly skyrocketed. "Kang Sho. No messing around," Fire Bull quickly advised when he saw Kang Sho seemingly itching for a fight. "I don't know what grudge you have with that young man, but you will cause all of us to die here if you act now." At this point, Fire Bull regarded Kang Sho as if she were his ancestor. It wasn't simply because Kang Sho possessed astonishing strength, it was also due to her unpredictable temperament. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she could be smiling at someone in one moment and killing them in the next. In fact, this had happened multiple times in Seven Luminaries Town, and the Fire Demon Party had already made many enemies in town because of Kang Sho. Currently, they were about to engage a force of 1,000 holy race experts in battle. Even if it was just an aerial battle, it wouldn't be easy to deal with. If they were to start a fight with the Dawnlight Party in such a situation, it would undoubtedly lead to a nightmarish scenario. Others might not know of the Dawnlight Party's true strength, but as an old rival of the party, Fire Bull knew just how formidable the party was. It was especially so for the party's leader, Sky Pivot. Sky Pivot was so strong that if he disregarded caution and unleashed his full power, not even the top 10 experts of Seven Luminaries Town would dare to provoke him. The summoner class might seem to primarily rely on summoned creatures as their main method of attack, but Sky Pivot wasn't just a summoner. He was also a spirit controller. And while the spirit controller hidden class might not be considered a peak class, it was an advanced class that strongly complemented the summoner class. As a spirit controller, Sky Pivot could devour the souls of creatures to strengthen himself. When combined with his summoner class's ability to merge with his summoned creatures, Sky Pivot could easily transcend tiers. Normally, though, Sky Pivot would rarely ever use this move. Fireball only happened to see Sky Pivot using it once during their previous joint dungeon raid. If it wasn't for the Dawnlight Party being put at risk of annihilation, Sky Pivot might not have used that move at the time. While Fireball was anxiously keeping Kang Sho in check, standing atop the illusory griffin, Moon Bamboo and the others instinctively drew their weapons and fixed their gazes on Kang Sho with great caution. Who is this young lady? Why is her aura so terrifying? Moon Bamboo was greatly shocked by Kang Sho's presence. If she didn't know any better, she would have thought she was facing a demon god. As an expert with Tier 6 intermediate concentration, Moon Bamboo could remain calm even if she faced a genuine Tier 6 god. Yet, even though she was currently facing a young lady of the same tier, her heart pounded with great anxiety. This was simply unbelievable. How many monsters are there hidden in the greater god's domain? Billowing Water was at a loss for words. Originally, she believed she had already reached the apex of the greater god's domain, thinking that few experts among the younger generation could rival her. However, upon arriving in the inland region of the Western continent, her assumption was quickly proven wrong by Black Flame, ranked 11th on the Sacred Glory list. And now, she was again proven wrong by Kang Sho, whom she had never even heard of until today. Moreover, these unknown experts she encountered seemed to be getting younger and younger. While Moon Bamboo, Billowing Water, and the others were recovering from their shock, Kang Sho suddenly retracted her imposing aura, transforming back into a harmless-looking girl. I was just playing a small joke with Big Brother Black Flame, leader. Why are you taking it so seriously? Kang Sho said, chuckling softly as she looked at Fireball's nervous expression. A joke? Fireball looked at Kang Sho's playful expression in exasperation. You nearly scared me to death. Just a moment ago, he was only a moment away from taking preemptive action against the Dawnlight Party. After all, Kang Sho was a member of the Fire Demon Party. So long as she made a move, it would be equivalent to the Fire Demon Party making a move. And since they were going to engage in a battle with the Dawnlight Party, it was only natural for them to take the initiative and finish the fight before it could escalate. Otherwise, if Sky Pivot unleashed his full power, the Fire Demon Party would suffer significant losses. Rather than focus on me, I think we should prioritize dealing with the Holy Race experts first, leader, Kang Sho said as she looked at the Holy Race experts who were less than 200 yards away. True. Nodding, Fireball turned to Sky Pivot and said with a serious look, this is your last chance to submit, Pivot. Otherwise, we won't help you afterward. Aren't you being a little overconfident in yourself, Fireball? You'd be better off focusing your concern on yourself. Don't let me see you failing to even make it to the entrance later, Sky Pivot said, chuckling. While he did not know the exact strength of the current Fire Demon Party, he was well aware that the current Dawnlight Party was significantly stronger than before. In addition to 3 half-step Tier 6 players, the party also had Billowing Water, whose basic attributes had already reached the standard of Tier 6 players. With such a formidable lineup, breaking through the Holy Race's aerial encirclement would be a piece of cake. Let's go, leader, Kang Sho said to Fireball after taking one last look at Shifeng. Since party leader Pivot has already made his decision, we will wait for the Dawnlight Party inside the city. Kang Sho was personally interested in Black Flame and originally intended to eliminate him herself. However, when she thought about how she might risk exposing some of her strength, she decided to leave this matter for the Holy Race players to handle. All right, then. Suit yourself, Fireball said as he looked at Sky Pivot's confident expression. Then, he directed the Void Manta to fly toward the several dozen approaching flying mounts. A moment later, the Void Manta, under Fireball's control, abruptly turned into a blur and swiftly flew past the approaching Holy Race experts without attracting attention. It was as if none of the Holy Race players noticed the Fire Demon Party, and they simply let the party fly past their shoulders. What's going on? Moon Bamboo couldn't help but be dumbfounded by how easily the Fire Demon Party had gotten past the Holy Race experts. Why did those Holy Race experts let them pass just like that? A mental combat technique. That's a mental combat technique. She has actually mastered a high-ranking mental combat technique. No wonder Fireball was so confident. Sky Pivot exclaimed. Who is this young lady? Mental combat techniques were extremely rare in God's domain, their rarity comparable to fragmented divine artifacts. Some of the stronger mental combat techniques could even rival divine artifacts in rarity. As for the difficulty of mastering a mental combat technique, it was several times greater than mastering offensive and defensive gold combat techniques. However, so long as a player managed to master a mental combat technique, they'd be nigh invincible among players of the same tier. The Holy Race experts look furious, leader. I'm afraid it might be difficult for us to break through, Moon Bamboo commented when she saw how all of the approaching Holy Race experts had already unleashed their holy auras. It was obvious that the Holy Race experts had realized how the Fire Demon Party had played them and were prepared to face another mental combat technique. What made Holy Race players stronger than human players was their mastery of Holy Aura. So long as they activated their Holy Auras, their strength would undergo a tremendous transformation. Even in a competition of raw strength, Moon Bamboo, who was a half-step Tier 6 Guardian Knight, would be outmatched. Splashing Fire and Budding Leaf also couldn't help but grow nervous. Previously, they had planned to take advantage of the Holy Race players' unpreparedness to swiftly break through. But now, all of the approaching Holy Race players had used their Holy Auras. In such a situation, their chances of breaking through became highly uncertain. Meanwhile, Fire Bull, who was close to reaching the city, couldn't help but chuckle when he turned back and saw the Holy Race experts closing in on the Dawnlight Party. He had tried to advise Sky Pivot, but it's a pity the other party refused to heed his advice and conceitedly believed that he could break through the Holy Race army with just a couple of half-step Tier 6 players. However, as the Void Manta was about to reach the city walls, Fire Bull suddenly heard a deafening thunder echoing from behind him. Immediately afterward, the sky darkened, and mana in the vicinity vanished completely. When Fire Bull turned around, he saw a swordsman standing at the edge of a patch of darkness. As for the 1,000 or so Holy Race experts who had been closing in on the Dawnlight Party, they had all vanished from the sky as if they had never appeared. Goddess-ranked mana technique, Sword of Space. Let's head over as well, Shifeng said as he sheathed the Shadow Incinerator. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,